A few weeks ago, I went to see 80s icon Rick Astley in concert. Let me tell you, he was amazing. And we'll come back to Mr. Astley later on in the presentation. Whilst we were away, we were having a pizza and I was chatting to the guy who was serving us. And he'd recently graduated with a master's in data science from Manchester University. Great, happy days. And we were asking him what he was looking for in terms of his next step. Where was he looking at going in terms of his career? What direction did he want to take? And as he was explaining to us, it was all very much based around the serving others kind of industries. So he was looking at charities, he was looking at social enterprise, he was looking at all that sort of industry areas. And that was great. And we were chatting still, and he told me that his initial degree was in geography and sort of geology. So then I asked him a kind of a question that got him really thinking. And the question was, have you ever thought about one of the big oil companies? And I mentioned a specific oil company because I've worked with them in the past in placing people with them. And they are very much at the forefront of renewable energy and sustainable energy sources. And that's where their research is going, because they recognise that oil is not going to last forever and they've got to do something about it if they want to remain competitive. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I never thought of that. That was a really interesting way of looking at things. He hadn't considered that even though the big oil company was something that maybe he thought wasn't quite what he wanted to do, perhaps it was. It fitted in with his education, and it actually fitted in with the thing that I want to talk about more than anything, and that's his values. Values are what drive everything that we do. Your values are likely to be different to mine, and be likely to be different to somebody else's. Everybody has slightly different values. And basically what we do is we want to feel a sense of belonging with somebody that's got similar values to us. And that's where he was going with that. So if our values drive our behaviour and drive our thinking, if we have a conflict in values, particularly in the workplace, that's going to really make us unhappy. You may have seen some organisations that have got their values plastered all over the walls in terms of this is what we want to have as our culture. But actually what they have is something quite the opposite. And it's kind of disingenuous. It doesn't really fit with what they really are versus what they're saying that they are. I've worked for a couple of those companies, and let me tell you, it is not comfortable, and I wanted to get out as soon as possible. So in order to combat something like that, what you can look at is something called values-based leadership. Now, what we're looking at here is something that is being, and particularly in this presentation, is something that's going to be introduced at a fairly low level from a team perspective. So if you're coming in as a leader and you're thinking, okay, I've now got this team, what do I do? How do I actually introduce something? Here's something that you might want to think of: values-based leadership. And with values-based leadership, a leader is going to have these 4 key attributes. You're always going to be asking yourself some difficult questions. Consider question number 1 to be, what are my values? What are my non-negotiable core values? And if you really want to stretch yourself, then ask yourself, okay, how am I living those non-negotiable core values on a daily basis? And where am I falling down in living them? That's the first thing that you want to be looking at. And this is all about self-reflection. You're going to be looking at yourself. You're going to be thinking, okay, how am I doing things? What is it that I need to do slightly differently if push comes to shove? You can see some of these other ones: self-confidence and humility. Now, that for me is really like a seesaw, a balancing act. You've got to have the humility to know that not everything is going to be based on what you think it should be. But you've also got to have the self-confidence that says, if I think something's right, if I've got the experience that says it's right, I'm going with it. So that for me is a real interesting balancing act. And then having that balanced perspective. If you've got people that disagree with you, you've got to be able to look at their side of the argument and think, do they have a point? There's no point in you just thinking, you know what, it's my team, I'm in charge, what I say goes because I'm right. Chances are you're not. We all make mistakes. We all have instances where we're wrong. And part of being a values-based leader is knowing when you're wrong and when to say, yeah, okay, let's look at doing something slightly differently. If you're going into an organisation or a team and you're looking to actually introduce values-based leadership, you are going to get difficulties. This is sort of basic change management. People will not necessarily always want to accept that change. And on the screen, you can see 5 different things that may stop you or may hinder you at least in applying your values-based leadership to your new team. Think about what you can do to address each of these. Certainly that one of the fear of the loss of status up at the top. If you've got somebody who's a subject matter expert who knows everything without having anything written down, they're the kind of person that is going to be losing status as you're making changes. They're the kind of person that you want to address and make sure you're bringing them into the fold, so to speak, as you're making the changes. So far we've looked at what are your values, how you're living them, how you're not living them. And then if you're bringing these into a team, what kind of things are going to hinder you doing that? And again, you can see on there, there's some of them. As you're introducing it, these are the different things that you can do that will help you. Communicate. If you're going to tell the team, hey, we're going to bring in values-based leadership, and then you don't tell them what you mean or what it is you're exactly doing, then the chances are that they're not really going to cooperate with you. One of the things that I've done in the past with teams, and I've done it in classrooms too, is create a charter. How are we going to treat each other? How do we expect to be treated by the rest of the group? And then it's everybody's responsibility, if that's not working, to call it out. If somebody's not behaving in a manner that befits that charter, that person gets told and they need to stop. Have a look at what can be improved. There's always going to be something, and you know, there's differences between change and transformation. A change might be small, whereas a transformation might be huge. It's up to you to decide whether that transformation needs to take place, as in straight away, whether you're going to introduce huge changes or whether you're just going to change things bit by bit. You're going to need to look at the situation and figure out from yourself. Like it says there, small changes will make a big difference over time. Consider the Lean Six Sigma practice of continuous improvement. That's what we're looking to do. We're improving things bit by bit. And then once you're starting to make these changes, make these differences and improving everybody's lot, that's when you can start thinking about, hey, let's celebrate. We're doing a really good job. We're getting to where we want to be and we're making a difference for everybody. And then finally, what are the benefits of doing this? You can see that retention is up there at number 1. I looked about 5 or 6 years ago at how much it costs to recruit somebody for even a low-level position in an organisation, and it was about £26,000. So that's about, I don't know, $35,000, and this was 6 or 7 years ago. So you imagine every time you're losing somebody, you're costing that much money in retention. You're going to improve the productivity and the goals. Everybody's going to want to come to work. They're going to enjoy working because they know what to expect. You've got that charter in place. Everybody knows how things are going to be. It's an ideal place to work. And then finally, for you personally, if you're going to go into that kind of team, if you're going to change the dynamic, if you're going to improve the productivity, if you're going to improve the retention, you're going to get yourself a reputation as the kind of leader that people want to follow. And if you remember that very first slide that I had up, a leader without followers is just somebody out for a walk. Here is where you've now got your followers. Here is where you're beginning to become a leader of note. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'd come back to Rick Astley, and his biggest hit was all about how he lives his values, how he describes his values and tells everybody what they are. So, just as a quick reminder, here you go. So there you go, a very basic introduction to values-based leadership. Let me know what it is you think that you can do to improve your lot and your team's lot. And stay tuned for further updates on how this can help your career as you're going forward. Keep smiling, keep positive, stay fantastic.